climate change is a core and important element in development. The fact is that following a climate resilient strategy toward Africa's development is important. Otherwise, what we could face is that the development progress that Africa has made, and this was very difficult to get that progress over the last decade or so, would unravel. And also when you think of the fact that Africa's contribution to climate change, to global CO2 emission is some 4%. And yet, because of poverty and because of the vulnerability of the citizens, it is much more difficult to have the resources to actually respond to the challenges of climate change. Also, when you look at the fact that Africa is the fastest urbanizing continent, what it means is that since urbanization is a growth driver, that many of the cities in Africa which are in coastal territories will be threatened, and that would potentially be disastrous for the continent. You also look at the issues in energy access. Just about 24% of Africa's population currently has access to energy. And what that means, therefore, is that a focus on finding as many ranges of cost-effective energy potentials for Africa would have to be at the center of its development. And I think the final thing is that even when you look at the Africa's contribution to CO2 emission, though insignificant, it's concentrated in forestry degradation and in land use. So what it means that issues in forest management and aspects of sustainable land management would be important for Africa. All of these are normal development challenges. And so what is it that we do in the strategy for Africa as far as climate change is concerned? What we do is to look at adaptation and to look at adaptation in a way that talks about climate risk control, and then to look at the opportunities that Africa has for mitigation, however insignificant that might be at this particular time. And then you look for the opportunities for scaling up the financing that Africa would need in order to finance the adaptation as well as the mitigation. And then finally, the knowledge and the capacity development elements. So these are the critical pillar of the kind of strategy toward Africa that our climate change agenda speaks to. African countries really have to grow in order to reduce poverty, and you need energy for growth. Now, for Africa to follow a low carbon trajectory, it has to invest in the possibilities for renewable energy that it has, whether it's in hydro or it's in solar. But these are the kinds of investments that are beyond Africa's own capacity to mobilize the resources. When you think of some 560 million of Africa's nearly 1 billion population, or already 1 billion population without access to energy, that is so significant. What it means is you have already excluded a huge chunk of a population from economic activity. So what to do is to meet the African leaders who have shown a strong sense of commitment. They understand it. Even though, you hear a lot of them say, we're not responsible for the CO2 emission. That's not, there's no culpability on our part. But they recognize that they may not be culpable today, but they don't have to wait to become part of the culpable group. They can take a different track immediately and begin to invest. But what it would take to invest in the kinds of renewable, Africa has got plenty of sunshine, so solar is an opportunity. But think of the cost of solar technology to make it cost effective. Think of the kind of economies of scale that would make it cost effective. That kind of technology is not yet, it probably will eventually happen, and maybe some financing to enable it happen will ultimately be mobilized. But at this particular time, I think the emphasis is on how Africa can tap into as many cost-effective opportunities that it has. And so it's the whole language of a comprehensive energy mix with an eye to reducing any possibilities of increasing the carbon, in decreasing the level of carbon emission. Well, you know, I can understand how that thought could occur to people, but it would be important to think this much more analytically and in a more profound way, and to understand that in our approach to each country, we work and define country-specific solutions, and within these country-specific solutions, we try to harness as much as possible every renewable energy option. So it's hydro, it's solar, it's wind, or geothermal, like what we're doing in Kenya. And then we also work with countries to look at energy efficiency and conservation. We also promote a lot of regional energy trade. So that way, some countries wouldn't need to go finding solutions that are not climate friendly. And so in all of this, though, there could be cases where in a particular country, the most cost-effective energy source would be fossil fuel. Now, when it is that, I think the most important issue would be that for these countries that are development challenged and needing to grow in order to tackle the abysmal level of poverty that still exists on the continent, that we should be able to find the best technology, the best applicable technology to enable them reduce the consequences of fossil fuel. And then to focus on the fact that many of those kinds of countries that would follow that path are concurrently defining for themselves a long-term mitigation strategy, showing that at a particular stage, they are already buying into a future that is low carbon trajectory. By working with the countries to develop sustainable hydropower as a critical component of the comprehensive energy strategy. And this builds on what I said earlier, which is that Africa's hydro potentials are enormous. Everyone recognizes that. Yet, it is only currently realizing 8% of it. Such an insignificant portion. And, you know, by current estimates, if Africa were able to just raise its game to the current share of Canada's, use of hydro as an energy source, it would multiply its energy supply, current energy supply, 8-folds. That would be really material. It would be material increase for Africa. And so by doing that with these countries, by working with them and supporting the complementary investment in transmission and distribution activities, and of course focusing on the institutional and sector reforms that should drive the kind of participation and of private sector in the energy sector, we at the bank are able to help push that agenda toward a renewable energy trajectory for Africa. And in working with Africa on the hydropower, what we do is as a global institution to lean on global best practices, and so that, you know, to mitigate also the downsides that people sometimes worry about when you focus on hydropower. So the issues the issues in hydropower that have to do with the environmental and social impact the whole issue of long-term river basin management, and then the issues that have to do with the stakeholders and their participation in the process of the discussions that lead to hydrology, that lead to hydropower solutions, and then a focus on hydrology and ensuring that necessary mitigations are put within those important elements in hydropower. So for us at the bank, it is looking at it from that comprehensive investment factor of really moving the agenda toward renewable option through hydro power possible.